Eventful Lives. People come in. We've just moved during the course of the summer months the library from downstairs up to take over almost the first floor of the parsonage. People come in who have not seen my library, and one of the first questions that you often get is, do you read all of these books? No, I don't read all these books. First of all, there's some books there that aren't meant to be read. They're research books. You look into them, you use them, they're tools. Secondly, there are other books there that you don't read, but you begin to read portions of, depending on what it is you're working on. Thirdly, like everybody else, I collect books and set them aside when they seem interesting, and then sometime, through a mysterious divine process, usually moving books so that they fall out between two others where they've been hidden, I find a book that I would like to read and haven't, and I pick it up. That happened during the course of this summer, and I found a book called The Image, a guide to pseudo-events in America. This book is so up to date that the publication date of 1961 will shock you. Let me just read a couple of ideas to stimulate and to show what he calls pseudo-events. Admiring friend, my, that's a beautiful baby you have there. Mother, oh, that's nothing. You should see the photograph. Strikes you as funny because it's true, isn't it? The simplest of our extravagant expectations concerns the amount of novelty in the world. There was a time when the reader of an unexciting newspaper would remark how dull the world is today. Nowadays, he says, what a dull newspaper. When the first American newsman, Benjamin Harris's public occurrences, both foreign and domestic, appeared in Boston on September 25th, 1690, it promised to furnish news regularly once a month. That ought to make you laugh. News once a month? But the editor explained it might appear oftener if, quote, any glut of occurrences happened. The responsibility for making news was entirely God's or the devil's. The newsman's task was only to give an account, quote, of such considerable things as have arrived unto our notice. Although the theology behind this way of looking at events soon dissolved, the view of the news lasted longer. The skilled and faithful journalists, recording with exactness and power the thing that has come to pass, is providence addressing men. The story is told of a Southern Baptist clergyman before the Civil War who used to say when a newspaper was brought in the room, quote, be kind enough to let us have a few minutes till I see how the supreme being is governing the world. Within the last 100 years, however, and especially in the 20th century, all of this has changed. We expect the papers to be full of news. If there is no news visible to the naked eye, we still expect the papers to be full of news. Would Mr. Ford be running with Mr. Reagan if it had not been for ABC, NBC, and CBS? It's a question we'll never know. But the fact of the matter that in the two recent conventions, both the Republican and the Democratic convention, the conventions themselves were not only of so little interest to people that the amount of time spent by television cameras upon them reflected that, but we saw in a way which is happening throughout every single aspect of our American life, the power to create where nothing is happening. If you watched any of the convention coverage, you were immediately aware that what was going on formally in the convention was not what was being covered, but a whole host of news people were out trying to create news and to beat each other to the punch. The spate of cartoons following the recent coverage of these things is hysterical. Congratulations, Joe, you outgunned CBS by 12 seconds on that one. And the skill of a newsman to report what is happening has been changed to the skill of a newsman to create. For if you read the literature on news media at this point, you will find more and more that what is happening is a good reporter, quote unquote, sits down and calls people until he finds one making a statement that he thinks he can get somebody to oppose. Then he sits down and calls all the enemies he knows of that person in the halls of legislation and says, Senator so-and-so said this, what do you think? Until he finds one that says something back. And by the end of the day, he's got a real battle going, at least in the newspaper. A pseudo-event, an event that never would have happened if some newspaper man did not have to sell newspapers and have something to fill the columns and the pages. And we see the pseudo-event in the news media time after time after time on television, in the newspapers, in the magazines, where events are created specifically to be an event and covered by the news, not because they themselves have any value. The change in the Presidential News Conference is one of great interest. The great change came under President Kennedy. Up to that time, the Presidential News Conference was an opportunity for the President of the United States to hand out to newsmen releases concerning what he thought he was doing. No longer is that true. It has now become a pseudo-event. One doesn't care so much about the answers. The real question is, how does he look and how is he handling himself? The Presidential News Event now is a dramatic event in which a president does his best to show how nimble and quick he is in his mental feat. Am I right? The great non-event is coming up with a debate between Mr. Reagan and Mr. Carter. It is a non-event because it has no hope at really deciding who is going to make the best president. One cannot answer questions about nuclear policy, foreign relations, economic conditions in 2 to 3 minutes. Indeed, there is nothing within our whole history that shows that one who can would make a better president than one who took hours of plotting and thinking and days of researching to come to an answer. But the great pseudo-event will be done. And both are employing large armies of individuals to ensure that the image, the makeup, a la Mr. Nixon, is in precisely the right form and shape to give a feeling of robustness and healthiness to people who are watching but not listening, and who are reacting to the image, not the substance. I could go on and talk about this at great length because I think it's true in many aspects of our lives. Bestseller. What constitutes a bestseller in terms of a novel? First of all, bestseller by its very nature means there can only be one. And yet you walk up and down the shelves of any store and you'll see international bestseller, 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 bestseller. How do you count? And account for a book that is a bestseller. It is not by sales. There's no way that it's by sales. Because books are acclaimed bestsellers before they're published. It's an advertising gimmick. And we know it. And we fall for it. Last evening, on television screens across America, one of the great annual pseudo-events of all history took place. Here she comes, our Miss, not my Miss America. I have nothing to do about it. Nobody asked me anything. I'm not sure that we could have a Miss America or a Mrs. America. I'm not sure we would want one. I'm not sure that I want to deal with people as though they are images and ideals and not real. I'm not sure that the most beautiful people in the world aren't those who have a tremendous drive within them, whatever their physical character is. I'm not sure that maybe one can be a beautiful person without having some sort of pseudo-talent. Although I was told by my wife, who did watch it, that the talent this time was better than normal. Is that right? I don't know. And told by my son, who also did watch part of it, ooh la la, which scares me. He's only 10 going on 11. Dad, you should have been there. Wow. The only question I had is if he knew what he was wowing. If he did, I'm really scared, you see. What is a pseudo-event? A pseudo-event is something which is done for the event itself. A pseudo-event is an event in which we begin to work with not what is real in our lives and our existence, but something which is extraordinary and outside. I would define a pseudo-event as something that deals not with the realities of lives, but the images of lives. And images are becoming more important. We talk about corporate images, political images, church images. Mr. Robert Schuller in California is very careful about his image. I have reported to you from this pulpit on other occasions, but I think it's important to say it at this point. In speaking and lecturing to a large group, somebody came up to take a picture, and he stopped and smiled, and then turned to the congregation of ministers that he was lecturing to and says, I never have anybody take my picture except when I'm smiling, because my image is one of happiness no matter what's happening inside me. The Free Press and another news magazine or other newspapers, you can read regularly about the image, what the tie. People write in, I am going into such and such a business. What should I wear to give the image? We've been caught by the hokiness of advertising. If you want, you can buy in Ohio a diamond pin for $5. And when it arrives, it is a dime stuck to a safety pin. And you look at the ad, and it says dime, D-I-M-E-A-N-D, diamond pin, P-I-N. We laugh and we chuckle. But the same kind of hokum that puts that out is where many of our lives are being lived. We deal with images, we deal with selfishness, and we deal with what is ultimately transitory and of no lasting value. Now, not all events that are pseudo-events are bad. I will probably, in an effort to throw this cold, sit on the couch or lay on the couch and watch our lovely Lions today at some point. That is one of the great pseudo-events. Ultimately, I couldn't care less who won the game. I will hoop and holler and say, wow, fantastic. And 2 minutes after it's over, if you were to ask me who won, I probably will forget. I enjoy the moment. Therefore, I don't want to spend the time in some deep, down, hard. I want to just relax. It's a pseudo-event. It's an image. It has no lasting value. Except for a few who want to think back to in 1962, who won the National Football League. Who cares? It is played up by the television to the point now where you don't even get a chance to see the game. 3 commentators, 2 more on the field. A whole host sitting in a studio. I want to watch the game. I can't. I got to watch these silly interviews. What are you going to do, Coach? You going to throw your... Well, I don't know yet. I haven't made the decision. Why not, Coach? Now listen, does it mean if you do this and you do this, you're going to do that? Well, I might do that. You heard him, folks. He said. And the pseudo-event rolls on. I talk about this because churches get caught up in pseudo-events. Churches get caught up in image builders. Churches get caught up, and I'm going to be interested to see if anybody came up with a slogan. We become slick. We begin to talk about our image. We have a fine image abroad. Mary Hasha has done a beautiful job in getting more coverage for this church than any single church I have seen in the newspaper in the last few years. We get covered on our regular events. We get news coverage. We get radio coverage. We get television coverage. We got an image that people can't even blow. We also got 65 people here. Some of those are from out of town. People read it in the newspaper, or they see me on television, they say, isn't that wonderful? We should go there sometime. And that's the lasting impact. 3.5 years of constant television experience, in which we know we reached each week between 75 and 100,000 people. Not one single person ever showed up at Pine Hill Congregational Church because of that. Our image is great. If we're going to have eventful lives, then I think we have to take a hard look at the images in our lives and try to understand what is the opposite. I chose both as our reading from Isaiah and as our scripture from the book of Luke, the same passage. Listen carefully to what Jesus did on his opening sermon, his opening statement is recorded in the Gospel of Luke as to the purpose of his ministry. And he came to Nazareth, where he'd been brought up, and he went to the synagogue as his custom was on the Sabbath day. And he stood up to read, and there was given to him the book of the prophet Isaiah. He opened the book, the same passage which we just found, and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." The difference between a pseudo-event, which is done strictly because of the nature of the event, and the eventful life that we want to talk about in the course of the next few months, is precisely at this point. The pseudo-event is interested in images. It does not matter whether a corporation does or does not live up to. It's the image of what people think that's important. It does not matter whether a church helps people in the reality of their lives. It's the image of people gushing that's important. The first thing in a true event of life is something that it's extremely personal and not the image. The beauty of a picture may be beautiful, but it's the person or the scene that is the real beauty. There is an art and a talent to taking a fine portrait or a fine picture, but it is not the same as the real scene. And in today's world, we have lost that contact. We not only have, through mass production, been able to take the original and reproduce it hundreds and thousands of times, we've even been able to correct and appreciate in our own eyes, improve the original. When my daughter went to the graduation photo session, they told her very, very clearly, "Don't worry about the zits, sweetheart. We'll take care of those in the studio." The imperfections that are part of what I love about my daughter are gone in the photo that is turned out. She looks better than life, and therefore is not life. For events are ultimately centered upon the individual and ourself in that sense. They are relationships between persons. They are on a one-to-one basis, even though it may be a group involved. And all eventful lives can be cast out and aside by those who are busier and busier and busier doing nothing. I bet you I just pulled it out. No, I think I got lucky. No, I just pulled it out. I didn't get lucky. I did. I turned the page down. It's hardly surprising that magazine and newspaper readers no longer find the lives of their heroes instructive. Popular biographies can offer very little in the way of solid information, for the subjects of themselves are mere figments of the media. If their lives are empty of drama or achievement, it is only that we might have expected, for they are not known for drama or achievement. They are celebrities. Their chief claim to fame is their fame itself. They are notorious for their notoriety. If this is puzzling or fantastic, it is a mere tautology. It is no more puzzling or fantastic or tautological than much of the rest of our experience. Our experience tends more and more to become tautological, needless repetition of the same in different words and images. Perhaps what ails us is not so much as a vice as nothingness. The vacuum of our experience is actually made emptier by our anxious straining with mechanical devices to fill it artificially. What is remarkable is not that we manage to fill experience with so much emptiness, but that we manage to give the emptiness such appealing variety. As we become less and less involved in the human element of life, and less involved in the true event, we become more and more involved in the pseudo-event of lives. The celebrities, the stars, the individuals that we want to find out more and more about, but recognize that everything we find out has nothing to do with who and what they are in reality. And oftentimes the superstars are not really superstars at all, but are the figments of our imagination. And our true eventful lives are to be found in the human relations. And secondly, because they are to be found in the human relations, they are to be found in something which is being lost in this country at such a rapid speed that it is absolutely dizzy. They are to be found in the traditional concept of service of others. I am sick unto death of people telling me what they have a right to. I am sick unto death in churches across the country of people saying, I have a right to choose the church of my choice. And then when you begin to talk to them about what that means, says, you have no right to tell me where to go or what to do. This is a nation which is becoming like the world, more and more caught up in what's right for itself to do, what's right for me to do. The true events of lives are found not only in the recognition of personal relationships and personhood, but in the service growing out of those things. Every single teacher of morality, of law, of greatness in history has ultimately emphasized that if I do things only because it's right for me to do them, I am determined and ultimately to fall. But if I do things to reach out to others, what is it that Jesus says? I find myself. Because of the emptiness of our lives, we get more and more pseudo-events. We run faster, we do more, we do more, we do more, we do more, and we get hungrier and hungrier for something real. And the reality of life is to be found in the personal relationships and the service of one to another. And that service is valuable in and of itself. No, I do not get thanked for most of the things I do. But I don't do them to get thanked. If I do, they're no longer real. No, I'm not appreciated for hundreds of things that I do at Pine Hill because nobody or one person or one family knows about them. But I don't do them to be thanked and to be noticed. The more honest I am with myself and the more honest we are with each other and the more we understand the eventful lives, we begin to recognize that the personal relationships that grow out of a whole, developing, serving one another because it is right to do so, whether it is appreciated or not, gives meaning to life that can be found in no other way. The third thing about eventful lives is that ultimately it is a changing experience that has not just the moment, but value. Value, worth, change, and growth. It throws away the images that so often that we held out into our minds. We want to be thin and eat all that we can. I always say to Chris, take any one of the women's magazines. I hate to pick on the women's magazines, but they're good at this. And in every single issue, you will find big columns of gooey desserts and new diets. We want to be friendly and warm and mobile so that the kind of roots that put down and grow and get beyond the pseudo images of the cocktail parties and the backyard barbecues and begin to develop the kind of warmth that holds people together never develop because we still want to be free to go. Harvey Cox in The Secular City talks about the apartment living complex where people never really get to know who their neighbors next door are. Aside from the sounds of one shoe dropping at night. Always one shoe. They're upstairs now. And the genuineness of a church. I'm sitting there and somebody says, why are you at Pine Hill? I say, I'm at Pine Hill because it's a place to worship God, number one. I worship God because I think it's important in my life, and I worship God by trying to find genuine events that help me to know people better and center upon the people who help me to know that as I seek to serve people and God, I find myself, and I find the strength and all of the things that go on within myself to give me the strength, because it is valuable in and of itself and does make a difference. Should I come to Pine Hill? I think you should. Why? For the same reasons. I believe in a good choir. I believe in good music. I believe in good preaching. I believe in a good Sunday school. But no church has them all, nor will they ever. Don't ever, ever, ever say to me, I didn't like the sermon, therefore I'm not coming back. I didn't like the hymn, so I'm not coming back. I didn't like the choir, so I'm not coming back. I didn't like the Sunday school teacher, so I'm not coming back, because that's not what church is all about. If you are, you're looking for pseudo events. If you want a performance, we can give a performance. There's skill in here. We can do a very polished performance that would be good on any television screen across the country, but it'll be just that, a television screen. But if in the course of this year we do our task together, positively, reaching out, looking forward. I chose a longer passage of Scripture. Did you see what it said in our call to worship? To comfort those who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a faint heart. In the weeks to months ahead, God willing and our strength permitting, this church will bear the mantle of God's praise. Genuine events of life centered upon personhood, service,